I bought this whole 12-speed mountain bike drivetrain from AliExpress for £130. Is it a bargain, or do you buy cheap, buy twice? So full disclosure, neither Zitto or AliExpress have paid us to do this. We've used our own money to buy this kit because I'm a bit nerdy and I want to find out if this ultra low sticker price Groupset is actually any good or if it's a waste of money. But before I continue, I've got a favour to ask. Can you hit that subscribe button, share and like this video? It definitely helps us out. So if you have a look at the Zitto storefront on AliExpress, there are loads of different options, including components. Like there's a stem for 80p, less than £1. To drop a post lever for £1.81, seems like a random price, but every pence matters at that price, I suppose. And there's lots of different options for drivetrains in different colours, different speeds. So we bought this very fetching gold and black option for, like I say, around £130. And there's even options within that. So for bottom bracket, there's either a press fit or a BSA option, which is the one I chose. So threaded external cups. But the fitment, like I say, it wasn't exactly perfect. It comes with this XC crank, so it's actually for a triple chainring on there. There are single options, but only as a separate, not as a whole package drivetrain. So when it comes to fitting the bottom bracket and getting the chain line right, I've had to do a bit of bodging. So I've actually had to put 2 spaces behind the drive side cup of the bottom bracket to give me enough space, because otherwise that chainring is touching the chainstay. And I've got that chainring in what would be the middle ring position, because on the outer one, the chain line was crazy. In fact, that way around, because I couldn't actually get into the lowest sprocket on the cassette, the chain would literally fall off. So I've had to space it that way on the cranks and then that way with the bottom bracket. So the chainring is now clearing the chainstay, but still the chain line is still pretty extreme. So it's not wanting to sit in that lowest gear very well. It is working, but you know when you can hear it clicking, like the friction between it is not brilliant. Although I've got to say, you know, this bottom bracket, the bearings feel absolutely fine. You can buy that bottom bracket separately for around £8. So that feels to me like, how can you go wrong with that if you can get your cranks to fit it? So it's a cable actuated rear mech, so really simple to fit. You don't get a cable end in the pack, so that is going to fray on me. I didn't have one spare in the van. All relatively simple to set up. Well, in fact, really easy. B-screw, the limits on the high and low, really simple, and they work, and it looks straight. I will say that cable angle, so when it's in your highest gear, so with the slack on the cable almost, that is quite an extreme angle over to that fixing point for the rear cable. But other than that, it looks okay. And yeah, the clutch, I would say, so that's how you actuate it there. That's clutch off, that's clutch on. It's very minimal what effect that is having. The chain is only actually 3 grams heavier than the Shimano M6100 one that came off it. But I've got to say, it looks very nice, but I'm not sure it feels that great. I'm surprised actually how easy the roller fell out of the middle of the chain when I was putting the quick link together, which works. Interestingly enough, there isn't a direction on there, which you do find on most quick links. There isn't one. Who knows what that means? But yeah, it doesn't feel that solid, but we shall find out. I'll put some watts through it and see what happens. The chainring is an aluminium narrow wide design, 32 teeth on this one. It's 104 BCD, so fits most mountain bike cranks. Looks okay. I've got to say I've pedalled about half a mile in the dry on a brand new drivetrain, and some of the anodizing is coming off it already, so I'll see what happens at the end of the day. The shifter is micro new MX-12, 12 speed of course, is super plasticky, and it does not play ball with these Shimano levers, especially the way I set them up. They might work for other people, but obviously you have this gear indicator which is massively wide, so it won't fit in this gap, so I have to run it the inboard of my brake levers, and I cannot reach it. Where I'm riding along, I actually have to move my grip on the bar and move my hand grip on the bar to reach that shifter. and it feels really lightweight and plasticky. It works, but also the action. So it feels to me like an old school Shimano Rapid Fire when they first brought those levers out. So go into lower gears, simple enough, but then going back to the high gears, you have to pull it towards the bar. So you have to reach around with your finger and hit it, and I basically cannot reach it at all. It's got sort of tucked in right behind that lever. So it doesn't work very nicely. With modern Shimano levers, you can sort of just hit that any way you want and it will shift. So that is the weakest link so far. But I think I should jump on the bike and put some miles on it. So the shifter is annoying, I've got to say. Having to completely move my grip on the bars when I want to shift doesn't work when you're going through jumps where I want to click down a gear midway. I have to let go of the bar and go, so that's annoying. But also, there's a real resistance when you go to getting up into that 52 tooth. The shifter, it just goes rock solid. So it feels like you're pushing against the limit screw on the rear mech, but it's not. I can see. In fact, it's really simple to undo that limit screw by hand. I don't need my Allen key, just wind it back off. So I can see there is room for the rear mech to move, but the shifter feels like it's completely hitting a limit. So you have to really force it up into that 52 tooth. And then that added with the chain line, I can hear the chain rubbing. Like, it feels like I'm gonna snap it if I pedal too hard. So even if I don't, the wear on that chain is going to be pretty extreme with those forces. That chain angle don't feel great. But also when I come out of that lowest gear, again, there's loads of resistance. Like it's a really harsh click down that first one. But then in the next 11 gears, it's smooth and it's fine. As much as it does feel really plasticky, and if you pushed it too hard, you'd probably snap that lever off. Felt my cranks lock mid-air, so it didn't feel very good. And the chain has gone backwards, which is weird because I don't remember backpedaling. I must have a little bit, and it's stuck to the chain ring and it's got wedged down in that chainstay and has scratched the hell out of my chainstay. So that wasn't great. You can see it's just popped out, but it's done a lot of damage to my fresh new Canyon Stoic, which I'm a bit gutted about. Don't know why it would have done that. Obviously try not to backpedal, or maybe I did between corners. And if I spin it back, oh yeah, there you go. It's sticking. The chain is sticking to the chain ring, so it's all fresh. I've not done anything. Actually with the new SRAM or Shimano chain, I often actually spray some degreaser on it. It comes with that really sticky, kind of waxy lube on there, and I normally get rid of that, and then I put the chain on, dry it again, and then stick my own lube on it. So this has got the factory lube on it, which doesn't feel anywhere near as thick and as sticky as that stuff you do get. But it's starting to go a bit dirty and black. Obviously, it's a really dry day, so it's only picking up a bit of dust. And yeah, it's I've got a bit of a swarf off my frame there, in my finger, but that is sticking to the chain ring more than I would expect. Down to the rear derailleur. So it's working. Like I said already, the clutch works pretty well. It's adjustable, it shifts cleanly. It seems really unusual to me to be able to undo and do up the limit screws by hand. There's no way you'd be able to do that with a Shimano or a SRAM rear mech. What does that mean? Do they come with Loctite from factory? I don't know. I've never actually noticed. Need to have a closer look. But obviously you could add Loctite to these because they're definitely going to back off. I've had B screws back off on downhill bikes before, so I would definitely do that to these to begin with. But does that also tell you something about the tolerances for this? Does it mean that these are already a bit sloppy? I mean, that is moving around. I don't know what that's actually fastening into, but that is wobbling quite a lot. So I would expect that to really move around without doing anything to it. Longevity of rear mech, I can't comment on that, but at the moment it is working. Obviously the ergonomics of that shifter, I don't really like, I think I've made that clear, but kind of annoyingly, I took off a Dior shifter that uses that I-spec from Shimano to mount really nicely underneath the lever. So these companies have thought about how to get their levers to work nicely with dropper posts and shifters to not only make them look good, but also get them in the exact right position with loads of adjustability as well, because not everyone likes their levers like I do, sort of quite far along the bar, but that doesn't work. But probably worth mentioning that at the lower end of SRAM, their SX does not have their matchmaker system. It's actually like a band clamp, although you do not have that gear indicator on there, so it is much easier. And do you need a gear indicator? I would argue probably not. But actual performance-wise, in the middle of the cassette, it works pretty darn well, to be fair. Obviously, when I get up to these low gears, I've said already about the chain line, makes everything feel like there's a load of friction in the system. But in the middle, where the chain line's straight and you've got these ramps on the cassette, it shifts surprisingly quick. It's not as smooth or as fast as the SRAM transmission, obviously, which is, you know, way more expensive, different price level to this. But even Shimano with their Hyperglide and their Plus as well, where you've got ramps up and down, it's not as fast and as smooth as that, but it's perfectly okay. You can see all the ramps on these sprockets if you look closely, except for the 11, just everything else does have them. Obviously, when you're shifting, the idea is you're supposed to back off the power on any, you know, even the fanciest new transmission. It's always a good idea to lift the power to get a clean shift, but also save your chain as well, because that is culprit number one of snapping chain, is trying to do it under full power. I will try and test it with a bit more power. I don't have massive watts, as you may not be shocked to find out, but I'll give it a go. I'll have to retrain my brain, because after many years of mountain biking, I've almost learned to do this genetically, is to back off a little bit. But let's try and put it to the test and see if I can snap a chain. Right, I will apply the brakes and see how horrible I can get a shift. Well, it's a fairly unreasonable test. I mean, I do that occasionally, sometimes when we're filming, actually go down, turn around and come back up straight away to get another shot. So it's not unusual for me to actually be a bit ruthless with drivetrain. That sounded okay, but if you take a close look, that chain is now sat in between two of the sprockets. So I have bent this sixth one down this way. So I don't exactly know how I've done that, but the cassette is kaput. Maybe I can bend it back, I don't know. AliExpress on the whole, it always seems kind of a bit mystical to me. You kind of don't know much about it, but this works. The shipping was free, it was quick, we had tracking. It's probably worth mentioning as well that obviously I fitted the kit myself, but if you bought this kit as a cheap way of maintaining your bike and then you took it to a shop to be fitted onto your bike, I'm not sure how well that would go down, because obviously the shop haven't supplied the parts, they don't know anything about them, they probably won't have dealt with them before. Most shops obviously supply and fit the kit as well, which is how they make a bit of their money. But yeah, I don't know about liabilities and things like that. If a shop fits this kit and they think, well, that chain isn't looking that great, and you go outside and you snap a chain and have an accident, yeah, I'm not sure how a shop would react to you coming with this stuff, but I'd be interested to know if anyone's got any experience of that. Jump in the comments down below. So we found the factory website for the Zitto products, and on there is no mention of warranty, which is definitely worth mentioning, because obviously I've bought this from AliExpress, not from a shop. My cassette is now broken. So I don't know where I'll be at if it came to getting that replaced. I have a funny feeling that I find that quite hard. Obviously, your SRAMs, your Shimano's are great big companies. They do have warranty, and yes, both of them have had issues in recent years with product recalls, but that does tell you that they stand by their products and they're willing to look after the consumer. I've got to say on AliExpress as well, some of the products you see there are stepping very close or over some of the IP of other products out there, some brands. So I would be cautious about the brand names you're buying off AliExpress. There are some Shimano branded stuff that seem too good to be true. It looks really, really cheap. So be wary of that as well. From my job here at GMBN, I've definitely witnessed a lot of R&D, whether it be on the racetrack with the highest level products to in the factories, how things are produced. And I have seen how that can trickle down to the lower end parts as well. So it's not to say that is all high end, super expensive stuff. You do see it on the Diors, the SX, the NX, things like that, all that trickle down technology. So you do benefit from a lot of R&D from those big companies. In conclusion, do I think this Groupset is a bargain? Well, when I was fitting it, I was subtly impressed. I think, all went together nicely. It's, yes, possibly a bit heavy, but it goes together nice. And it shifted nice in the bike stand. It shifted nice on the trail. However, now after riding it, I'm definitely sliding down the scale to, I think it could be a waste of money. Buy cheap, buy twice might be the saying that, it works here. It depends what you're bolting this onto. Are you bolting it onto your commuter where you're replacing worn out kit and you know that you're not really going to test its longevity, you're not going to be shifting really hard, you don't mind a little bit of discomfort moving your hand shifting, then it could be a good option. But now I've put it on a mountain bike and I've seen its limitations. I'm not that impressed. Is it down to the materials, the tolerances not being that great? I think it probably is a bit of that all added together. It's worth mentioning as well that this cassette fits a Shimano HG driver, and you may have noticed my wheels don't match because actually, with the latest kit that we ride, there aren't many bikes or wheels that you can come standard with HG driver. Yes, you could probably buy one to fit the wheel that you have, but a lot of people these days have microspine or XD drivers, even from the sort of mid-market up. So it's not necessarily going to be a straight bolt-on for a lot of people. If you choose to get your Groupset off AliExpress, it's got to be said that getting spares for this isn't going to be as easy as walking into your local bike shop. You're going to have to go down the AliExpress route again, which of course is cheap, and our stuff showed up nice and timely. However, it does seem like the returns process is slightly more engaging if you do need to send stuff back.
Can we learn about future mountain bike tech from the past? Well, we've got a very special bike that's going to show us some insights on what that future could possibly be. Okay, let's jump back in time. The year is 1991. The Cold War is coming to an end. The World Wide Web is just starting, and Nirvana launched their influential album, Nevermind. In the world of mountain biking, a technological arms race has begun, with the big players investing lots of money to make bikes that are fit for purpose. One of the most unique and iconic bikes was this, the Manitou FS. Visually striking and wildly different from anything else on the market, the bike was designed by Doug Bradbury, a former motocross racer and a newer mountain biker. Let's skip back a little bit later. We're in the late 80s and Doug Bradbury is making his own aluminium frames. It's quite unique. He founds Manitou, and there's lots of unique things that he does. Different hub spacing, different headset sizes. And he makes the first Manitou suspension fork. And it is really unique for the time. It's got 1.5 inches of travel, so a little bit more than some of the others. But key is it's a super light design, and it's favoured by lots of racers. Julie Furtado, one of the legends to be, uses it for her first World Champs win. And then, well, lots and lots of legends come knocking at the door, including John Tomac. It's here that the Manitou FS takes shape. Perhaps it was always Doug's dream to have a full suspension bike, but like many of those moto folks, he seemed to understand that suspension was good for mountain bikes because, well, the wheels can track the terrain, you get better traction, you get better control, and ultimately you have more speed, you have a better bike. This is what the future looked like in the 90s, and it was a really cutting-edge design. The suspension worked really well, and not just down the trail either. It worked across the trail and up the trail, and thanks to innovative construction and material, it was super light. It's as light as some of today's cross-country bikes because it only weighs 24 pounds. As well as the innovative suspension and frame materials, Doug Bradbury also pushed boundaries of what standards were. He tried to push for a different standard of hub spacing, 115 on the front and 145 on the rear. It didn't quite take off, but early Manitou bikes did have this near boost spacing for extra stiffness while reducing weight. Proof of concept? Well, we're not going to race this one, but in the 90s, these bikes were really fast and they won lots and lots of races, including Jürgen Benecke's overall title in 1993. That was in downhill because that's where this bike really took off. With this bike, Manitou really led the way. It was sold under lots of different brand names as well, but it was sold up until 1996. Flash forward into the modern world, and what does it look like? Have we got flying cars? Do we have robots that do almost everything? Well, I mean, almost. But what does the mountain bike world look like? Using my crystal ball, I think I've got a good idea of what's in store for future mountain bikes. Aluminium alloy manufacturing techniques have really charged ahead, so I think it's still hot. Gone are the 2 or 3 axis lathes, now we've got 5 axis lathes. And what we can produce from these machines is truly mind-bending. One thing that seems to have stayed the course for a long time is the rear derailleur. Okay, we've gone up a couple of clicks on the rear cassette, we've lost the front mech, but we've still got something dangling down, ready to be struck by a rock. So I think the future is something that isn't dangling down. This is the Manitou FS Mark II. This bike is really something, but how far off were my predictions? This frame is incredible. This front triangle is one-piece machined. So we're not talking about tubes being cut down and welded. We're not talking about machine chunks bonding into aluminium tubes. No, this whole front triangle is one piece. I think that's a machinist's dream. I think it's beyond the realms of where Doug Bradbury thought we could go with machining. It's got carbon fibre inlay, which helps tune that frame stiffness on a custom level. It's incredible. And then there's the rear suspension. They've looked to the past to reimagine a future suspension system. And this is a highly modified Manitou 24-inch Dunit fork, where it's been remachined and got redone internals, but it's a real piece of work. You've got a remachined upper crown here to fit in. You've got remachined lowers. And it actually works too. Up front, you've got a Manitou Mattock. That's a really clever trail fork that runs from 110 mil of down-country travel all the way up to 150 mil of trail travel. Then there's the transmission. Gone is the dangling derailleur, replaced by a modern gearbox. Yeah, we've got a gearbox here. This is the Pinion C112 gearbox. So it's a 12-speed gearbox. And no chain. Oh, no. We've got a Gates CDX carbon belt drive. So we've got a tooth system with a belt drive. We've got a tensioner. I mean, it's a truly winter-proof, maybe future-proof transmission. It wasn't just frame materials and suspension that evolved at a rapid rate. No, brakes evolved from those early cantilevers too. And quite quickly, we matured into having disc brakes. And Hayes were one of the early innovators because they'd made brakes, well, for a long time, and they'd made disc brakes for a long time. And these wonderful purple Hayes are nod back to their early brakes, these purple Hayes edition of the Dominion brakes, which are still winning at the highest level. The wheels have grown from 26-inch up to 29, but it's not just the diameter that's grown. No, the width has grown out much more as well. And the materials have changed. Opposed to aluminium alloys, which were, well, prone to cracking, prone to failing, now we've got carbon, which can offer wonderful ride qualities and being much, much stronger. Whilst the controls have stayed in relatively the same place, the bars have got much, much wider and the stem much, much shorter, but that's to give you more control and more confidence. I think this is a fascinating glimpse into the future. We've got this incredible frame technology here, a completely revolutionary way of making frames. But then we've got this wonderful nod to the past and a nod to where we've come from with these custom decals and this rear suspension setup. But then we've got more attention to detail with this incredible head badge. It's a wonderful melding of the past and the future all together. With frame materials, it feels like aluminium alloy is still at the cutting edge literally with this bike because it's machined. So we've moved from tubes that are cut and then welded to one-piece machining. Will that be in the future again? I think we can't stop where aluminium will go. The fact it can be recycled, the fact it's tough. I feel like there's a future in metal bikes. I mean, there's more innovation on this, but one thing that I think is really good to see is, even in the future, we've got flat pedals.
For 35 years, the off-road wheel has been eating up everything in its path, rolling over gravestones and the bones of the weak. Wheels have gotten bigger and better, burying smaller wheels. The black and green wrecking machine is here. It is going to take no prisoners on its way to... Oh no! What's going on here? Bit dramatic, isn't it? Tunicles. As you can see, I have the future of mountain bike technology here. The 36-inch wheel bike, and this one, well, I've called it Gravedigger because it's going to bury the competition. Okay, so dramatic introduction aside, today we're going to be talking about wheel sizes on mountain bikes because let's face it, they've gone up and down all over the place over the years. So yeah, we started with 26-inch wheels on mountain bikes, but it wasn't necessarily a decided thing that was the best size. It was because tyres and rim sizes were readily available, and those early pioneers that were crafting bikes from lost and found bits and pieces, kind of like the hot rod movement, that's what they used, basically. There was no insinuation that it was the best, which is why, in the background, whilst those bikes were forming the basis for the modern mountain bike, designers like Gary Fisher and everyone else behind the scenes were experimenting with other wheel sizes, like 29-inch. But let's not forget that Ibis, way back in the day, did bikes with 20 and 24-inch wheels. Cannondale did 24 and 26-inch. Specialized later did that in the early 2000s with their big hit bike. Also in the background, there was the 650B, which we later referred to as 27.5, which actually elbowed out the humble 26-inch wheel. So these days, we mostly have 29s, like you see on my bike here, and 27.5s, and sometimes a mixture of the two, usually with the smaller wheel on the back and a bigger wheel on the front. As you can see, this mountain bike, a size extra large, it's in my size, I'm 6'3". It's got 29-inch wheels and they look appropriate for the bike. If you'd have seen me on an equivalent bike when I rode 26-inch wheel bikes, it just looked wrong. This is purpose built for off-road use, and actually, by all accounts, really is the ultimate wheel size. Or is it? We always thought the 29 was ridiculous when it first came out.
For me personally, I think it's the worst thing I've seen happen to mountain biking since I've ever been involved in it.
In my opinion, the XC boys should have the 29s. Yeah. Give them that. We'll have the 27s.
Yeah.
And the slopestyle guys can have 26.
It's definitely a controversial subject, and I get the feeling in this tent it's not something that I should be bringing up.
But there's another wheel size, the monster-sized 36-inch wheel. Now, I first saw these at COC Europe on a brand called True Bike, but there's various other brands out there like Curve, and I think Trek have even experimented with them over the years. Let's have a look at this monster-sized 36-inch wheel bike. Oh dear, look at this thing. It's not often I stand next to a bike and I feel small. Honestly, like 6'3", look at the height of this thing, it's absolutely massive. So 36-inch wheels, front and rear. The Nimbus wheels on here, which actually associated with the unicycle world. The tyres are as well, they're called Night Riders. And it's kind of, well, I'm just going to refer to this as Gravedigger because, let's face it, it kind of looks a little bit like the black and green wrecking machine that we all love from the monster truck world. And I suspect it's probably going to ride over things kind of like a monster truck does. So this bike is a complete custom. It's made by Ted James Design. It's a titanium frame. It's a complete one-off. And it was made for probably the nicest as well as the tallest cyclist that I know. Connor Dunn from GCN. He's a man who's so tall he has to fold himself through any doorway, a little bit like the alien when it's chasing Sigourney Weaver, in fact. Strange looking creature, I tell you. But anyhow, he's been fed up with riding 700C or 29-inch wheel bikes forever because they look ridiculous on him. So he had this bike built custom for him. Now, as you can see, it's absolutely colossal. It's running on a Shimano gravel group set with Di2 on there. I've removed the drop bars and I've put some flat bars on here, some nuke-proof bars, and I've put some regular Shimano XT brake levers on there, bled the brakes through, and put some flat pedals on it, essentially. And I've lowered the saddle about a foot as well, because he really is a giant. And I've been thinking that, well, if people are making 36-inch wheels for off-road use, then I reckon it's got legs. This actually legitimately could be the next wheel size. Do you want to take the bike? So I'm just going to get the other one. Looks like something out of a circus with you picking that thing up. I can hear the Benny Hill theme in the background, you know. Look at the state of it, it's absolutely massive. Do you feel like you're riding your dad's bike? Although in today's video we're focusing on the future of mountain biking, I just want to reference a few differences between them here. Now this bike is a size extra large, running on 29-inch wheels, 1x12 system on here. So I've got 34 tooth chainring on the front, and I've got the lowest gear on the back as a 51. So that's a massive gear, supreme for climbing stuff. And the big wheels do roll over stuff, but they're not going to be a patch on what I can do on this. Gearing though could be a bit of a problem. Connor's a roadie, so he's got a 36 on the front and he's got quite a small block on the back. The lowest gear available to me is a 42. Now that's going to be a bit of an issue here, not necessarily because of what I can turn over, but the sheer size of those wheels, and they are heavy on this particular bike. I've since learnt that you can get super lightweight carbon rims, and I think Connor is going to be building a set of those over on GCN for this. But for this video, we've got the really quite heavy wheels. So it's going to accelerate quite slow, but it's going to be a monster truck when we get it up to speed. I'm not planning on slowing down in a hurry, which is just as well because it's got tiny little roadie sized discs on there, but it's not really going to be an issue. This bike with the titanium frame, the massive wheels, that's all the tech you need. You don't need anything else. Like, I'm going to prove that suspension is irrelevant just by riding this bike. Okay, so the wheels are absolutely massive, so they're going to weigh a bit more, but what they're going to gain in momentum, I'm sure of it, they're going to be absolutely fine. So let's just see what they are. No, just over 4 kilos. So what's that? Just over 9 pounds. That's not too bad really, considering the size of the wheels. I mean, they're massive. Don't forget, the 36 over a 29. It's going to be worthwhile, I'm sure of it. Oh my God, you won't believe this. 9 pounds 1 ounce. That's 4.9 kilograms per wheel. That's just disgusting. That's absolute, isn't it? I cannot imagine that this is going to ride well. I tell you, so much heavier than the 29s. My God. Okay, so what I'm already noticing is you can literally straight line it across routes at any angle, it just doesn't matter. You can get the power down kind of like you would on a full suspension bike. Like, it does take a bit of getting used to because I've just hit my foot off the pedal a couple of times with a toe overlap. If I can have a lower gear, I think this would improve things. At the moment, I'm basically in the lowest gear, so I'm just going to blame that for the handling, because other than that, it's all right. It's not too bad. A little bit slow because the wheels are a little bit heavy, but not too bad. Let's point it down over some routes and let's get it up to speed a bit, because I reckon the inertia you're going to get with those wheels, that's where it's going to come in. And in comes Grave Digger for another descent. Whoa! Woo! Okay, black and green wrecking machine, well, black, silver and green wrecking machine. Yeah, so far so good. Enjoying it. Just been riding sort of some choppy, rooty surface to really sort of test the rigid frame and fork with the compensation of those big wheels. They definitely roll over stuff, like, it's no surprise, but they roll over stuff a lot better than I thought they would have done. Tyres could be a little bit better. There is a shoulder, but I mean, to be fair, they're basically road bike tyres. The thing that's interesting though is the flex in that fork. It's a titanium fork, so it's got an element of flex to it. Managing to buzz a few times just on the hose on the down tube there. It's not too bad though, to be fair. Quite enjoying it. You buttoned off. Dude, it's absolutely terrifying. I'm totally regretting riding this off-road. It's a nice road bike, but this is not the one for the woods. I feel like there's nothing this bike can't do. I tell you what, that low BB feels so secure. It's mental. Whoa. That's a new experience. It pulls you into the turn. So you've got quite a steep head angle associated with road bikes, admittedly. This is a road bike. And then you've got the really heavy wheels that have got so much inertia, so you do get stability return, but I can't quite figure out what's going on, if I'm honest. I kind of like it, but it's not that confidence inspiring. Absolutely loving it, it's amazing. Takes a while to stop on this thing, I'll tell you that.
How is it down the bike?
Alright. I can feel the way that people are looking at it around here, but I actually really enjoyed riding it. Really good fun. I can't tell if that's just because that's who I am. Like, I like riding obscure stuff and always have fun on bikes.
So you'd buy one then?
No, don't be daft. Repulsive, isn't it? Do you know what? Overall handling is actually really good. I mean, it's testament to the frame builder of the bike. Obviously, he's extremely talented. And to make a bike that handles well with wheels that weigh this much is pretty impressive. But it still manages to be quite agile, which I really didn't think it was going to be. Easy to track stand, pretty easy to wheelie, mess around on in the car park. Kind of what any mountain biker wants to do, really. Yeah, like so far, it's doing most things pretty well. I reckon we need to head somewhere a little bit steeper now for a play. Isn't this how all the freeride edits start? I'm not going to go like super fast. You literally can't stop on this, so like in that much of a hurry anyway. Ah, just what the monster truck is made for. Okay, so manoeuvrability is not the 36-inch wheel bike's strong point, shall we say. Loves going in a straight line, really good at that. As soon as you've got to move, nah. Fun though. Now, this thing is a mission to get up stuff with. I started braking where you were. So you're probably wondering how today went. Well, I'm still smiling. It's a pretty bonkers bike, to be fair, to ride. And don't get me wrong, I'm not expecting to have found like the world's best new bike you've never heard of. Just a bit of fun. And yeah, I've had great fun all day. A few observations though, right? So obviously with these heavy wheels, it did accelerate quite slowly, slow to brake, and also cornering was really interesting. As you'd imagine, trying to turn a bike in with bigger wheels like 29s can be difficult until you're used to it. With these wheels, it was another level. Now it's accentuated by the fact that they actually weigh a lot. Now Connor did tell me that there are some carbon rims and lighter tyres coming for a new set of wheels for this bike, so I would be keen on trying it again. But there's definitely a few interesting phenomenons that happen on this bike. One of which I noticed just coming down the bank behind you there. As soon as you're bombing along quick, it's arrow straight. It feels like even on rough terrain, you could just take your hands off the bars and just go in a perfectly straight line. To the point, if you wanted to turn, it actually makes it difficult to turn. Combination of things there, the inertia, the sheer volume and size of those wheels, but also your incredibly low bottom bracket point, which means it's just harder to tip it over. But as I found riding the berms, once you're turning, it wanted to stay carving. It doesn't want to come out of them. So, you know, there's a bunch of quirky things. Riding on the rough stuff though, now that was interesting. You could pedal it over wet routes and things like you would a suspension bike. Now, yeah, to a degree you could argue you could do it on 29s, but not to the same magnitude as that. Now, don't get me wrong, this one is basically a road bike, and I've put some, you know, mountain bike handlebars and controls on it, so the geometry is different. And of course, there was that flex in the fork that was bothering me. But hey, it's a beautiful looking frame, really, oh, it's just gorgeous the way it's been put together. And I do think for today's video, it's definitely worthy of having the old Gravedigger stickers on there, because this thing monster trucked over anything and was wicked fun to ride. Is it for me though? Nah, of course not. Back to the graveyard for this one, I reckon.
1x12 gearing systems are the present and the future of mountain bikes, right? Well, not if you're a Belgian company called Classified with their Powershift hub. That lets you run a 1x12 system, and a 2-speed hub gives you 530% of gearing, and it's virtually invisible. And Classified say, you've tried one bike, now try one better. All right, so who are Classified and what does this technology consist of? Well, Classified basically use automotive learning to bring this system to road and gravel already. So we've seen some riders picking this up, but this is their first proper mountain bike offering, and it's a 148 boost measurement. So this is the Powershift hub that slides inside this hub shell, and that's where all the 2-speed cleverness goes. The Powershift Boost hub that includes 2-speed wireless electronic shifting. Initiated by this ring shifter up on the bars, wireless and charged by magnetic USB, the battery is good for over 10,000 shifts. Has this smart through axle that receives the signal from that ring shifter and shifts the hub. An 1140 12-speed one-piece cassette. And it's this cassette that Classified say is one of the main advantages of their system. Basically, having a much tighter ratio cassette means the average step down between gears is 10.5%. Compare that to a 1052 cassette, which has a 16% average step down. I have the Powershift set and Classified wheel set. You can see how the Powershift hub actually slides into that rear hub shell. But there will be other aftermarket versions available soon. So on the roadside, there are people like DT Swiss, Hunt and others making basically wheel sets compatible with this Powershift hub. There are two options for this Classified wheel set. Both have an inner width of 30mm. These are the 28-hole straight pull option, also with a center lock rotor, designed for XC or trail. But there's also a 32-hole with J-bend spoke and 6-bolt rotor for more gravity riders. There's also an 1134 cassette option from their gravel offerings if you want something that's a bit tighter than the 1140. That was the kit, but what does that mean out on the trail? So the hub has got 2 speeds. It's got the standard ratio of 1:1, and then at a flick of this ring shifter, it goes down to 1 to 0.7, which means that the cassette is spinning faster than the hub. All that happens in less than 150 milliseconds, and you can do that under full power. So it's tested to over 1,000 watts, which is probably about enough for me, to be fair. One of the big differences as well, you can do this without pedaling. So this could change the way that you ride your bike. Because that means if you get to an unexpected steep climb, then you flick the switch, don't even have to pedal, and you're into your climbing gear. The system also means you can stay in the middle of the cassette more, which means a more efficient drivetrain because your chain line's better. Potentially a larger chain ring means less chain wrap and more material, so more durability, but also you don't forget you've got that machine steel cassette as well, so a durable drivetrain. The wider range of gears and also the smaller steps between them might actually mean that you want to step up your chainring size by a couple of teeth as well. There's been some chat about the drag associated with that 0.7 ratio on that rear hub, but Classified say they've done loads of testing, they've built rigs, and they've basically come to the conclusion that it's 99.7 efficient. And I've got to say that I don't notice any drag from that lower ratio. All right, there's loads of tech chat. Let's take this thing out for a spin on the trails and see how it rides. It's really easy to shift the equivalent of 2 to 3 gears on the cassette really quickly using the Powershift without having to back off the power at all. This feels like a completely new style of shifting that comes into its own on some of these British trails that are up and down all the time. You notice the ability to keep the power consistent and keep your momentum much easier than having to constantly jump gears using the rear mech. Now on to the weights and the pricing. Well, let's start with a couple of components. The cassette weighs 248 grams. It's actually one-piece machine steel as well, so durable. And actually the ring shifts are super lightweight, just 24 grams. But it's the total system weight, I guess, you want when you're comparing it to your normal 1x12 system. Actually, interestingly, this cassette is over 100 grams lighter than an XTR 1051 comparison. But comparing the full Classified Powershift system to a DT Swiss XRC 1501 wheel set, if that has an XTR 1051 cassette on it, then the Classified system is 177 grams heavier. But interestingly, if you spec the same wheel set with an XT cassette, then it's only 74 grams heavier, and obviously with the advantages of a 2-speed hub. Now to the prices for the full Powershift set and the Classified wheel set. You're talking $2,699. Or for the Powershift set with hub shell to build your own rear wheel, that comes in at €1,549. Or the Powershift set without hub shell to fit a partner wheel like a Hunt or a DT Swiss, well, that's €1,449. All right, so is this basically a front derailleur that looks better? Well, no. I mean, it's definitely got some similarities, of course, but you know, it's been a while since I've ridden double chainring or even triple, but I would hate using front derailleurs. The amount of times you'd have to really back off the power to get it to shift at all smoothly. Your chain would drop. Often I would just stay in my biggest chainring and make do with that. So it's completely different to that. You know, you've got all the advantages of having a 1x system where your chain doesn't bounce off, but this is virtually invisible. It's so much better looking, so much less faff than a front derailleur. And I am a rider that's quite sensitive to cadence. I think it's from, riding flat pedals a lot. If you spin your feet too fast, it always feels like you can bounce your feet off the pedals. So I've always liked having small jumps between gears, which you don't get on those massive 1052 cassettes. So I do like the smaller cassette here. And it is pretty impressive the way it can shift in between those two ratios really smoothly, pretty much silently. And I like being able to jump the equivalent of 3 gears at a time. I find that really useful. Classified claim that you shift less on the rear derailleur with this system. I would agree. Yeah, I'm definitely using this way more than I thought I would.
Today's bike check, as you might notice, is something very unusual right in front of me. This is known as the Slingshot. This is the team issue frame. As you can probably work out, it's very different to most modern frames. It's got a cable instead of a down tube. Let's have a closer look, shall we? This bike is known as the Slingshot, and the reason for that, quite simply, before we get into details, are the fact it's got a cable down tube which helps ricochet the bike along the trail. But as with any peculiar design, there's obviously a story of how it got to this in the first place. And designer Mike Groendel was actually surfing the pits around on his little mini moto bike at a moto race, And this bike in question he was riding actually had a crack on the down tube, allowing the bike to actually sort of crab along a bit. And he noticed that not only was it very comfortable, but it actually gave it a bit of a lurch when he rode, when the bike would sort of compress and extend back together. So he took that concept to the bicycle and came up with this design, which is actually used on other styles of bike as well, including racing bicycles that you'd see on the road. But on a mountain bike at the time, bearing in mind the suspension would have been brand new, we're talking like the 94, 95 era, this thing came out and is radically different to anything else. It's made from 4130 chromoly, true temper chromoly, very strong, very durable. And instead of having a down tube, it has a cable. And on the top tube, it has a lump of fiberglass here. Rumour has it this is some sort of leaf spring from a Corvette. Not quite sure on those facts, but nonetheless, it is very interesting. And the whole concept of this was your bike could hit an obstacle, the front end would compress, and the cable would ricochet and pull it back in alignment. So it actually enables the bike to walk its way along the trail. Fascinating, terrifying, freaky, all of the above. I think I kind of love it though. Now you have to bear in mind that this frame was on the market available and it had a rigid fork on it. This one here actually has a Pace RC36 on there. But when this came out, having a rigid fork on it, it enabled it to have an element of comfort that wasn't currently available on the mountain bike scene. And the early adopters that rode this bike actually really loved it once they'd got past the terrifying fact that the whole front triangle was almost disconnected. It would move side to side, it would move in every direction pretty much, and it was held together essentially by that cable. Can you imagine riding a bike today where the front triangle is actually designed to flex? You think that everything we have on modern mountain bikes, the front triangle has to be very stiff. Other parts of the bike will flex, but it needs to be stiff in order for the bike to actually maintain traction and everything it's supposed to do. This did the complete opposite. Absolutely bonkers. Now up to the cockpit part of the bike, and first up you're going to notice it looks very different to what we ride these days. These days we don't tend to have bar ends, we tend to have much wider bars, up to 800 millimeters wide, and a very short stem. So these have a one-piece bar on here. Well, I say one piece, they're actually welded, but they're not separate parts. The bar ends are incorporated into the bar design. However, the bar design is frankly terrifying. They're titanium, I believe they're made by a brand called Tyres, and they're actually two-piece. In the stem here, it has a socket with a ball bearing, and basically the bars actually slot together, and you have a shim over the top that holds that join. Would anyone in their right mind now run a two-piece bar like this? I think it's insane, but you think of the tech from back in the 90s, and on a tape measure, they're coming in at a whopping 570 millimeters. A bit different to the 800s we'd run today. You think you have to cram into this 2 sets of gear shifters and your brake levers. Everything is extremely compact in here. Stem length is, well, the stem is a synchros stem and it's about 120 mil. And I'd say the rise on that is, it's about a 30-degree rise on there, so quite an angle on that. If you consider that most stems we have these days are 0 degree or 0 rise. Really nice stem design. It's actually got a bit of a hinge on this that's held together with Allen bolts and underneath, as opposed to having a regular faceplate with 4 or 3 bolts. These stems were everywhere at the time, and when the A-head system came out, they were one of the first ones to have what we called a knee saver back then. Early A-head stems, that is where the stem clamps onto the steerer tube, used to have a twin pinch bolt on the back. And on your bikes back then, like this, were a lot shorter, you used to catch your knees on them sometimes, so pretty horrible design. This is one of the first ones to actually have this incorporated on the inside. Not only did it look really neat, but it did crucially save your knees. Also, just notice it's got a classic Chris King no thread set on the underneath. The grips on here, actually these are Perish, they're actually quite hard rubber, but I do remember these from back in the day. These are surface grips. They used to be very soft actually, but they're not lock-on, so you would have had hairspray or paint or anything possible just to get them on to stick. Hairspray, of course, is what most people used to use because it's essentially a minor lacquer or a minor glue. Brake levers though, now these are something special. These are Ultec brake levers, and I've never seen these in the flesh. I only ever saw these in the magazines that I grew up reading. Now these were retrofit levers for Magura HS33 and HS11 and HS22 brakes. Now these are ultra trick. Just look at the quality of these things, like full CNC machined aftermarket levers for what was already an aftermarket product. Pretty cool piece of tech. And there's also a set of XTR rapid fire shifters just neatly stashed under the bars here. And I've got to say, they still look just as good now as they used to back then. Okay, so now let's check out the front fork on a bike. Now this might look familiar to you because we have an RC35 made by Pace hanging up on the GMBN Tech set. This is a later fork. This is the 36 and it's the Evo. It actually has a twin brace on it, one front and one rear. And Pace were quite famous for this and having the brakes on the back of the fork, which actually in the early days really did feel like it helped with braking power. As you might notice, the fork is quite short compared to a lot of forks we have today, but it's running about 80 millimeters of travel and it's got a Tyre coated stanchions on them as well. So it's a super high-end fork with those carbon lowers, and it had springs and elastomer rubber on the inside. But it didn't have any sort of damper like we have on even basic forks today. Yet somehow they still feel quite good, surprisingly good in fact. Mounted on the back there is a Magura HS22, as I said, mated up to those Ultec brake levers. And yes, it's a 26-inch wheel bike, of course. So what did you have in the day? You clearly had to have Mavic rims. So these are Mavic 117 SUPs, and the SUP rim was one of the first rims on the market. It was pinned, it was welded, and then it was machined down, so it had a perfectly smooth join. Mavic really did make the best stuff back then. Of course, everyone else has started to catch up, but Mavic really hold a bit of a place in my heart, I think. And this particular rim had the ceramic coating, so it was a super expensive one. It gave you better braking traction on the sidewalls of the rims there. Something just to note, a little close in detail, is the brake pads are not stock on these Magura HS22s. They're actually the Scott Matthauser pads in the orange colour. They were super soft compound, which mated with that ceramic coating on the rim really did give for exceptional braking power if you consider this is pre-disc brake era. Tyres on here, well, they're a bit more uncommon than what you'd expect on a gravel bike these days. They're 26 by 1.5 and they're specialised hard packs. But I've got to say, the tread pattern on them looks pretty modern. If you turn that to a 2.5, that'd be pretty good on a bike of today. And a final little touch on those wheels is a WTB grease guard hubs. Back in the day of using cup and cones, before we used cartridge bearings on everything, you could keep your hubs going a bit longer by injecting grease directly into the grease port and purging out all of that old muck. And out to the back of the bike, again, it's a 26-inch wheel running on those WTB grease guard hubs. The hubs though are quite interesting because this was pre-cassette design. There's actually a bit of a custom cassette going on here. So it's a screw-on block, but an 8-speed block, and it still uses a Hyperglide, which of course comes from the non-screw-on style cassette style that we're familiar with today. Lock ring on the bottom there. That's pretty cool to see. Rims, again, Mavic SUP 117 ceramics on there, again with another one of these old specialised hard pack 26 by 1.5 tyres. They're quite perished, but it's really nice to still see them on the bike. Brakes out back, again, another Magura HS22 with a Scott Matthauser soft compound pads. Although on this one, it's actually got a brake booster on here. They were there essentially because the brakes were so powerful, they actually forced the seat stays of the bike apart as you braked. So they'd have the brace there to actually help keep those cantilevers back in place to make sure that braking power went through to the rim. Pretty cool actually. Gearing on here, Shimano XCR, you've got a triple on the front with a 24, 36 and a 48 tooth chainring. The beautiful looking Shimano XCR crank there of course, and that front derailleur, which are pretty much non-existent by today's standards. And out back, the classic grey XTR derailleur still looks just as good. Okay, and finishing touches include a WTB saddle up on the top here. They're still making really good saddles today, so you should definitely check out their saddles. The seat post is a Syncross number, and the quick release on here is actually made by Salsa, the same front and rear actually. And the last little touch that I absolutely love is one of the early crud catchers with a custom mount so it can actually fit around the wire down tube on here. I think this bike is like actually an amazing piece of tech considering what everyone else was doing back in the day, but pretty terrifying at the same time.
Tyres are what connects you and your bike to the ground. A lot of thought has gone into the sight profile, the tread pattern, and even the compound of the tyre to make them perform at their best. But with a decent branded tyre costing around about 60 to 70 English pounds these days, I wondered if you could get similar performance for something that's under £20. mountain bike tyres I could find was actually on Amazon. Now you can see I've had to buy 2 different brands. Now this is because I run mixed wheel sizes on my nuke-proof Mega. So I needed to get a 29-inch by 2.4 and a 27.5 by, well, similar 2.4 as well. So I had to go with 2 different brands because they didn't actually make the 2 different sizes in the same brand. But this has given me a good opportunity to see the difference in quality between the cheaper options anyway. And there's already quite a bit of difference in terms of feel, weight, and actually smell. These smell really bad. And I'll be putting them up against my Vittoria Mazza, which is a enduro trail specific tire. It's what I'm most comfortable on. I run these all the time on my nuke-proof Mega, and I've got obviously a 29 in the front and a 27 in the back, and I usually run 2.4 on both sides. So what I have for the rear here is Baldwin's Baldy's Brown Wool. Yeah, and apparently the tread type is knobbly, excellent all-weather performance and long-lasting durability, although they don't state that they're tubeless specific, so I'm going to have to run a tube with that. So that's my first negative for the Baldwins. And then over here on the front, my 29er is going to be the Finchy folding bike tyre. That tread type is grooved apparently. Oh yeah. What we have here is a Finchy downhill tyre made of high quality nylon and rubber. Kevlar wire makes this enduro tyre foldable and lightweight. Perfect replacement tyre for XC bicycles. Also provides fast and comfortable ride on roads and tarmac. This tyre does everything, but also this does not state that it's tubeless specific. So to be on the safe side, I'm going to have to run a tube with that, which again, personally, that is a downside for me. I prefer tubeless. Vittoria, that they'll be going up against the Mazza, and the tread type listed here is for mixed and loose terrain geared towards enduros. So we talked about tread design, and there's a few things about the Mazza that I've grown to love over the time of riding these, and that is that they have this kind of tapered sipe profile. So as they taper in towards the end of the sipe or the knob, then it gives this kind of flexibility, this malleable feel, so that it's soft, which means it'll be nice and grippy, certainly if you're trying to climb technical climbs, or if you're riding over rougher terrain, it will grab better. But because there's a wider base, you still have that support when you're going into corners. It won't feel like the tyres bending or rolling. If you look over at the Finchy, these are absolutely solid. They do not move. They're quite short as well, which won't help in terms of malleability, certainly won't help in terms of durability either, I think. And even with the Baldies, I would say they're in the opposite direction. They are really, really soft, which is possibly going to be great for grip and tread. But they might feel really disconcerting in the corners. Vittoria Mazza, we have 930 grams for a brand new tyre. Baldwin's Baldy's Brown Wool is exactly a kilo, 1,000 grams. Now the Finchy is a 29er, so I will expect it to be a little heavier. It also didn't come in a 2.4 again, which is really annoying. So I've had to go for a 2.6, and that is 1.2 kilos. So the total weight from Vittoria of what I'm running on my Mega is 1,870 grams in total. And for the setup I've got here with the Finchy and the Baldwins will be a total of 2.2 kilograms or 2,200 grams. Now, weight might not be a massive issue for you, especially in enduro, but a lot of that weight on the cheaper tyres is coming from the ratio of rubber to nylon threads. So the thread count would be quite low in the cheaper end tyres. The Mazzas actually have a thread count of 120 TPI. So TPI is the threads per inch, so how many nylon fibres run through that. And the higher the number, then the more malleable your tyre will be, which will offer you great traction, especially on rough terrain, and it will feel a lot grippier. The Finchy here has 60 TPI, at least that's what they've listed it as, which is why it feels quite firm, like a sort of an affordable pair of rubber shoes. Right, first up, let's get acquainted with this trail on the Vittoria Mazzas, seeing as I'm used to these first. Right, let's go. That is soft. Now, there's not many tyres that are going to feel great in ground that's dry. So dry and so soft. Plenty of grip on my rear though. I can literally grind to a stop in those steeps. Right, let's open her up. Wow. Loads of grip in the corners. Gotta love the Mazzas. Woo! Went off track there, that was my fault. Jumps, grips well on the loose stuff afterwards. There you go. Easy, loads of grip. Could be that those rocks are grippy, but I'm thinking it's probably the Vittorias that are helping. No bending or distorting, as you would expect from a company that put a lot of money into R&D. That trail's pretty wild in places. There's like rocks and sand and corners and natural drop-offs. It's pretty unpredictable in places, but I think that is the perfect trail to put a tyre through its paces. So let's try the other Amazon set of tyres now. That went on very easy indeed. 19.5, perfect. So I've just taken my front tyre off and there is an absolutely massive splinter of wood through my tyre. No joke, I wouldn't have seen that. And obviously the sealant has sealed it, which is absolutely why I prefer tubeless tyres and sealant. If there was a tube in there, there's no way that would have stayed afloat and I would have got a very, very flat front tyre. God, these are so stiff and thick. Right, time to try the Amazon tyres, and obviously the big difference already is that the rear wheel looks so skinny and the front wheel looks so fat. And you may be thinking it's not a completely fair test, but I do think it's important to note that when you buy cheap tyres, you do get less choice on things like width. So anyway, enough talk, let's see what they feel like. Already a bit slidey in the rear. Nice volume in the front. 2.6 is obviously quite comfy. Oh, a bit skatey though. Oh, ah. Neither of them like the loose terrain. Oh, nearly lost the front wheel on that. Oh. Right, I've had to have a little pause because I had a little moment there where I was coming round a corner and I'm so concerned with the potential lack of grip washing out over the corner. What I didn't realise is that weighting the bike and having not much grip or sipes on the edges means the bike actually dragged inside and nearly threw me over the outside of the corner. So just to cut it short, I'm actually really noticing the lack of tread on the front. It's very washy and the back end is quite skatey, which isn't too bad. It makes me feel pretty cool in the corners, but I wouldn't say it was very fast or very safe. I certainly wouldn't want to race in these. Anyway, let's carry on. Oh my days, this is skating. I mean, they jump and land fine. As you'd expect, in a straight line, they're okay. Their front tire slipped down the rock. That was an interesting run. They're not terrible, but not amazing either. So let's go and have a little sit down and talk about the differences. Baldwin's Baldy's brown wool at the rear here. Now, first thing to mention is they absolutely stink. They smell like an old ashtray, which is just disgusting. And fitting them was almost a little too easy, in my opinion. They felt slightly baggy, and the recommended 30 to 55 PSI is not what I would like to run for an off-road trail tyre, certainly not enduro. I'd like to run a little less. Because they were quite thin carcass, the lack of support when going over rough ground, over rocks and over roots, I actually hit my rim. And again. For me, I would like more support and definitely tubeless for a rear. I'd also like to point out that the lack of tread on the sides of the carcass meant that the rear tyre washed out sideways quite a lot. Pretty much every loose corner it would wash out. But I think this is probably best left to tamer trails if you're going to run something like this, and you've got to be happy running tubes at quite a high pressure. So the Finchy folding tyre on the front, you know what? I really enjoyed having a 2.6. You know, the volume is nice to have, especially here in Spain where it's really rocky and rough. But when I fitted these, the pressure was a bit better than the rear. We were allowed to run a recommended 25 to 55 PSI, which is a bit better in my realms. However, the carcass was so thick and so firm that even in a low pressure, this felt like they were rock solid, which made them actually feel quite fast rolling, I must admit. They were good in the flatter trails, I would say, but the lack of tread on the center was a bit disconcerting. So although they look like they had good side grip because of the sipes around the sides of the carcass, the lack of tread in the center meant my front wheel washed quite a lot, especially when steering around loose, tight corners. And for me, that is just a no. For enduro, certainly. So steep, loose trails, and when you're riding proper enduro, I just don't think a cheap tyre with lack of support is very fun. You know, it's not fun to face plant. I quite like my teeth, so that's sort of a big no-no for me. Also, the tubeless element, I think, you know, I got away with it on the big volume here. It was a nice amount of support, even though it was tubed. So overall, like I said, they're not terrible. I think if I had a cross-country bike or a trail bike where I was doing nice kind of mellow trails and nothing was requiring me to hit the brakes or come in too fast into corners, they would be fine. They're fast rolling, and you know what? They were quite okay. But if you're going to ride genuine enduro trails, steep, loose terrain, rough terrain, that I do think it is worth purchasing a decent set of tyres. Not only will they offer you support in corners, they'll offer you more grip and traction in loose terrain, but also your brakes will work a lot better if your tyres can actually dig into the terrain.
Holy moly, have I got a video for you today. We are going to be answering a question that gets asked an awful lot here at GMBN Tech, and that is, how much fork is too much fork? Can you overfork a bike? So for this experiment then, we're going to need, it's going to have to be a hardtail, it's going to have to be affordable, and it's going to have a monster fork on the front. But what if we got knocking around? No. 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 Yes!
It's over there.
What the? Look at the state of that thing. Whoa. Wow, this is one wild looking machine, and I'm pretty sure it's not sold with 180mm Lyric on the front as standard. But let's take a closer look at this trusty steed. I've got here a 2019 Canyon Grand Canyon AL 4.0. This bike is normally spec'd with 100mm travel cross-country fork. It's exactly the kind of bike that we get asked if it's okay to put a longer travel fork on. So that's what we've gone and done. We've put 180mm Lyric up front on this size large beauty. So let's see how the bike can handle it. Now, time for a quick serious bit. I should say that Canyon do not recommend putting a fork of this travel on this bike. It will ruin the ride quality and will void any kind of warranty that you have with them. Anyway, enough of the serious bit. This is a tech video after all, so let's have a look at some of the numbers. The bike in its original guise has a head angle of 70 degrees, a bottom bracket height of 305mm, wheelbase of 1119mm, bar height of 1042mm, and a seat tube angle of 73 degrees. Now let's take a look at it with these monsters on the front. The head angle has become 64 degrees. Bottom bracket height, that's now at 327mm, whilst the wheelbase has grown to 1200mm. Bar height has gone up to 1100mm, and the seat tube angle is a positively slack 68 degrees. Crikey, those are some pretty big number differences, most noticeably the 64-degree head angle the bike now has, which is actually comparable to a lot of modern day enduro bikes. And obviously their other number differences have grown. Now, while 64-degree head angle may seem appealing, given modern day geometry, it's actually had a far more detrimental effect on the rest of the bike. But having said that, there's only one way to find out, and I think it's about time we took it for a spin. I'll be honest, I'm a little bit apprehensive riding this thing, as no doubt there's going to be a few, well, pluses and minuses to riding a bike with such a fork on. But there is only one way to find out, and let's start, well, with some uphill. Oof. Up, up, up. Front end comes up nice at least. Okay, we are coming up to some steepness, and oh my God, I am now at the point where I need to keep so much weight forwards that I've got no grip on the back. Definitely a big negative. Holy Lord. Oh, we're getting there. Wowzers trousers. We've made it. Okay, let's conclude on ascending then, because there are some big statements to be made here. A fork of this size on this bike has absolutely written off what it's like to climb. The front end is so high that you're using so much more upper body to keep your body weight over the front. But because you're doing this, the back wheel's just spinning, it's got no traction, it's got no grip on it. You also find that if you were to need to stand up, well, goodbye any grip on the rear at all, really. So the seat tube angle, obviously again, thrown off if you are sitting down. It's sliding so far back, your bum's all over the show. Yeah, definitely a thumbs down on the ascending. We've done the ascending, the climbing's finished, and thank God, because I'll be honest, it was an horrible experience for obvious reasons, like I've said, and I'm glad we don't have to do that anymore, but it's time to descend. So hopefully this thing can turn it around. You know, we've got slack head angle, we've got longer wheelbase. I love to go downhill, so let's hope this loves to go downhill. But I think we need to make one alteration, and that is, this seat post is way too high, so let's just slam that thing out of the way. Oh, there we go.
Slam it, Rich.
Well, it's slammed. I mean, that'll do then. That's what we're working with. There we go. All right, well, you know, that'll do me nicely. Let's go. Oh, my Lord. Oh, my Lord. Well, she's slack. Woo! Oh, my God. So, an immediate problem is that with it being slacker and a bit more sturdy, you pick up more speed, which is good, but the budget brakes mean you can't slow down. Woo! Woo! Oh my God! Oh my Lord! Oh my God! Oh, hey. Oh wow! Descending completed it, mate. So interestingly then, there were more pros I'll give it to on the over forking when going downhill, but downhill only at the moment. So the longer wheelbase, the slacker head angle did improve handling, and obviously the higher front end meant that on the steeper stuff it actually worked quite in my favour too. The negative, however, just to play devil's advocate, is that with the extra speed you gain and the confidence you have, the stock brakes on this bike weren't actually up to the task of slowing me down enough. So, you know, again, a knock-on effect of the over forking there. If you're going to beef up the front and make things faster, if you ain't got the right anchors on to slow you down, well then you're potentially putting yourself at a bit of risk there as well. But yeah, you know, that wasn't as bad as I was expecting. It's time to put this bike through something a little more indicative of what it's made for then, a trail ride. I'm going to head out for about an hour and see what this thing's like in its natural habitat. Brap, brap. That's a wrap then. So, just finished sort of my hour trail ride. Like I said, something that this bike would normally do. And do you know what? An actual pleasant surprise on my face. It wasn't quite as horrendous or pig-like as I was expecting. The raked out head angle did make it slightly more fun. I was standing up a lot of the time, so the seat angle didn't come into play quite as much as well. So actually on a piece of single track, it was fairly fun still. The added travel did absorb those bumps and just meant that you could have a little bit more fun, a bit more carefree on it. So actually, on the sort of the halfway ground between ascending and descending, not too bad at all. I'm still thinking 180 might be a bit too much though. Let's find somewhere to have a little perch down and go through what we thought of today then. So that's it then. I have ridden this bike today on a variety of different terrains, up and downhill, and I can safely say it is well and truly over-forked. And the difference between this and with a stock fork is clear as night and day. But does this mean you should over-fork your bike or not? Well, yes and no. A lot of manufacturers do actually put a longer travel fork on the front of their bike, but generally speaking, the frames are designed to take this, so the geometry and the characteristics of the bike have been adjusted accordingly. On a hardtail like this, well, you certainly could up the travel ever so slightly on the front, maybe a 120 or max of 130mm fork, but like I said, you've got to check with the frame manufacturer first. Anything over that, and I think you really do sort of negate any positives from a bigger travel fork, throwing out things like bottom bracket height, clip-in pedals as I did. Oh, wow. Seat tube angle and ride characteristics, just they get altered too much. So I should just reiterate, I'm afraid, a serious bit. If you are going to over fork or change the fork on your bike, do check with the manufacturer first that one, it's safe to do so, and secondly, that it isn't going to affect the warranty on that bike.
Welcome back, you beautiful people. I'm in the garage where I love to tinker on my bike. But when you tinker on your bike, maintenance-wise, you do need some tools. And sometimes these tools can be quite costly, or you haven't got the tool that you actually need to fix the bike. So today, I'm gonna give you a few ideas and tips on how to make certain tools that will help you in the future. I'm gonna kick it off with the simplest tool ever, and you use an old spoke. Now you can get tools that have one of these built into the tool, and basically when you're putting your chain on, when you're putting a new chain on, you're struggling to hold it together and you're trying to go over here, get your quick link, you just need something to hold it in place. Now to hold it in place, all you need to do is get a spoke. Look at this. You just get a spoke and you bend it into place, into a bit like this. This is a simple chain, I guess, holderer. That's what I'm going to call it, chain holderer. But you put it in there like that, and like that, and you've got, look, it's already there. And then you can get your quick links. You can add your quick link in there, like that, and then you just plonk it together, just like that. Boom. Simplest tool ever. Cheap. If you have an old wheel, if you have a super old bicycle that's laying outside, just take one of the spokes out and you can make this perfect little tool, and it can live on your tool wall. I like this. Cheap. This next one is right here, bottle cage bolts. Now this is a nightmare because you get this big old T-bar and you try and get in there and you can't. You go like this and it constantly, you got to keep doing this. Now I've seen this on the internet. Come with me. It's in here, and I get my box of goodies, and what I want is a washer and that little tool. So I have a number of miscellaneous bits in here because you just chomp through these T25s. You chomp through them. So that there is a 3mm or a 4mm. Let's just double check. This one is a 3mm. But you can make two. So I'm gonna make a 4 and a 3 because my other bikes have a 4mm. So I got a 4mm and a 3mm. Now, what I wanna do is find a nut that's big enough to use as a bit so I can hold it and twist it. Now you can see this nut here, perfect. This is an M6 nut. And what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna hammer it on. Nothing to do, just hammer it on. And you come over here and it fits in there perfectly. And then whilst you've screwed in the painstaking bit, with a little tool, then you can put this T-bar in, give it a good tweak, and then you're done. Look at that. Perfect. Incredible little tool. This is perfect for getting your bottle cage out, but it got me thinking. Now, I do have a few bikes that run Fox suspension on the rear, which comes with some adjustments right here. So your low speed, high speed, compression, and then your rebound as well. And one of them is a 3mm. Now, Fox do a tool. This little tool right here is a nifty ass little tool that has got both the 3 and the 6mm on there, so you can adjust your high speed and your low speed. It's super cool to put in your pocket, put in your bum bag, put in some frame storage in your backpack. You can do your adjustments on the fly. But this tool is expensive. It's £30 plus. It's £31.99 for this tool, which is a little bit steep, and I'm sure we can make one. So back to the desk. Come with me. Yeah, back to the desk. Get my little gubbin box out. This tool is a good tool, but it is expensive, and we can make it because we need to adjust our suspension because we don't have that tool. In here, I've got 6s and I need a 3. Grab them. Here, I've got the little tool that I've made for the bottle cage. I've got a longer nut. Now, I did try with one of these nuts and it wasn't deep enough, because what I want to do is match them, one on each side of the nut. And the nut gives you a nice bit of grip to twist it, which you need because they can be quite stiff in those rear shocks. So I've got a bigger nut. I'm going to go to the vise. I'm going to knock it in. Perfect. Now we can take this tool and we can insert it here. Okay. Beautiful. And that, well, it cost me a couple of p. I don't know, that was free. That came off something I had. And I'm sure people in their garages or in their little miscellaneous boxes would have random nuts kicking about. And these just come from tool sets that I've had, and I just collect them. Don't throw away these. They come in handy. Perfect tool. That was very cheap. That is going to live in my toolbox now. So this next tool is quite handy for sure, because if you're one that puts your bike in the back of your vehicle and takes it to the trail, and you take your bike out and you're going to put your front wheel in and your pads are like this, and you need to pry them open. Now, I am guilty for this, and so is Matt. We use a screwdriver to get in there and wiggle them apart to open up the pistons and the pads so I can slide your front wheel in so your disc doesn't just jam it in. I've actually used a disc to pry open the pads, but it does damage the pads, which is not good. Now, Park Tools do the PS1, which is this tool right here, and it looks like a disc brake. This is a tool that is handy to have, but some things we don't have at hand straight away. Pretty lucky I've got one, but some of us do have old discs kicking about. Again, don't throw them away. Keep all your old stuff. If you have a lot of it, maybe throw away a few of them, but don't throw away all of them. Now, I'm going to trace this out. I'm going to cut it out, and I'm going to use half of it, and I'm going to use this, something like that, with an old disc. With the disc, I've marked it out, which is important. Now, you can just use a hacksaw to hack at it and cut it apart, but for the ease, I'm going to use my works grinder. It's going to cut through this perfectly. So we've changed it up a bit because we want it to look smart. So you might as well spend your time in making it look smart. So I'm going to get rid of that there and cut that, run there. Right. I don't want to weld, but this would look incredible because I could just cut a notch through here, slide that in there like that, and then I have a perfect, look at, no welding. I'm going to cut down here. People have got this in their garage, or not in the garage, but they've got an old broom handle, whatever. I'm going to cut a notch in there, drill a hole through, bang a bolt through it, squidge it down. Now just go find a nut for him. From this to this. Look at that, it works. Well, actually, let's see if it works. Should we see if it works? Goes in there, like that. You can realign your pads, especially when they've been squeezed. Boom, fixed, perfect. It didn't take long, it was fun to make, and you don't have to go to the extremes to putting a little wooden handle on there or anything. You can just get some other things to hold it on. But I think that's perfect. But I do want to weld it. So we're gonna make one for Matt because Matt wants one. So I'm gonna weld one up for you, Matt. Where's my glove? Any excuse to get the welder out, but look at that. There we have a nice tool. It looks like a tomahawk. Look at that, that's cool. I reckon I could make loads of these. Who wants one? Let us know in the comments down below who wants one. Do like that. There you go. There you go, Matt. Thank you. Have you ever struggled to put a star nut in the top of your fork? Like you've got a brand new pair of forks, you want to put this new star nut in the fork and get it in, but you have no way of getting it in. You try and hit it with a hammer, you start to damage it, and you have to go to the bike shop to get another one or order one offline. Now, you can just do this. I've done this a number of times. You actually put the bolt into the star nut and then you whack the bolt into it, and then but it all goes a bit wobbly and you end up trying to do this and you kind of destroy the star nut. It works, but it's not good. It's not good practice. Now you can buy a tool that does the job perfectly. This is a star nut setter. You put it on, you put your star nut on there, you whack it in, and then this radius here is the internal diameter of your fork, your stereo tube. Now that thing comes at a cost, but if you are struggling to find a tool to insert your star nut and you don't want to do this, I come up with this ingenious way. So you get yourself an old top cap, you get yourself an 11/16 socket or a 17mm socket. You get a long bolt that goes all the way through, screw your star nut on, and then from there you can place that in your steerer. Now I haven't got a steerer at hand because all my forks are perfectly set on my bikes, but I did cut a previous fork and I did keep the old offcut of steerer. So you put your star nut up the top there like that, you give it a good old hold, and then you start whacking it in. And when you do get it in, you've got your socket, which is the same internal diameter as your steerer, and that will go in really nice and smooth and straight. This is a simple yet effective way of putting a star nut into your fork, into your steerer. Be it if you've got a new fork, or if your fork's been sent off to get serviced and has come back without a star nut in it, or you just need to replace that star nut because it went in wrong the first time. This is perfect. So you've made all these tools to make your life a bit easier, to put a star nut in, to remove your rear cassette, but you need somewhere to hang your bike. Now I have a Park Tools work stand here. It's perfect for working on your bike. It's always good to have your bike at chest height or at eye line height so you can remove wheels from both. You can remove your forks, you can work on your bike, you can spin it, you can work on your gears and blah, blah, blah. A work stand is a great tool to have. But there is ways of making it a lot cheaper. Now, I've made two of these in the previous videos. One was made out of complete wood. It actually worked really well. It worked as a wash stand and a workstation. Then I've got a new one out the back here, which is more of a wash station than a workstation, but you can actually use it as a work stand. So you can go out there when it's nice and warm and sunny, you can work on your bike and it's off the ground. You remove wheels and all that rad jazz. Perfect way and a perfect tool to work on your bike. Now we've made all these tools, the perfect place to put them is in a toolbox that can be put in the back of your car, your van, or just somewhere where you need to store them at home. Now this is a repurposed box that was come from all my works power tools, and I've just put in some shadow foam and cut down all the tools that I really wanted in a box to take with me wherever. I think some of these tools are going to live in here forever. Like one of these, I'm actually going to make another one so it can live in the garage, but one is going to live in here. That one is going to live in there. This is going to live in there. Definitely going to put this in there because I haven't got one in there. And then this, well, this one can live in my toolbox in the garage. Definitely going to put this in here. So there we have it, a few tools that we've created in the garage that will help make your life a lot easier, especially that 3mm, the 4mm on the bottle cages, because that there, trying to get a T-bar in there is an absolute nightmare.
Are more expensive lights worth it? Well, we're going to illuminate the cheap light versus expensive light debate with a night ride. Let's begin. Night riding is awesome. There, I've said it. It's so incredible. It can shine a whole new light on your local trails, allowing you to see them in, well, a whole new way. But do well-known brands of light really stack up against, well, those no-name brands that you might see on the internet? We're going to walk through the differences between some well-established brands and some brand names that, well, we've never heard of, and see how they perform on the trail. We're talking about lights. Yeah. 2 lights, because it's really good, especially on mountain bike trail, and especially more technical mountain bike trail, to run 2 sets of lights. And that's because, well, as you're riding, you get different depth of field from having lights in different positions, so one up on your helmet and one on the bar. Also, the other thing is mountain biking goes through wonderful, twisty, sinewy single track, and that's really fantastic. But if your handlebars are pointing one way and you've got to look another way, well, it won't be illuminated. So having a light on your helmet means you can see literally where you're looking. So having a helmet light and a bar light is pretty much essential for mountain biking. We bought some fairly cheap lights from a factory to consumer portal website. Hopefully that covers all for all the different websites that you can get it. We made sure it was a mountain bike one, and we made sure that it was waterproof as well. Although confusingly, the list on this one initially said waterproof, and then when we checked again, it wasn't waterproof. For both of these lights, the cost was £21.59, including shipping. This is the packaging that it came in. It's not that jazzy, but hopefully it's got everything we need. Okay, we've got the box, which I think has got the lights in, yeah, and then we've got, okay, lots of bolts, a couple of elastic bands. I feel like that's the mounting hardware. Right, let's have a look at the lights. Right, here we go. Okay, we've got the light itself, which is, okay, on the description it did say it was all aluminium construction, but this isn't all aluminium. These end caps and sort of the end point of if it was dropped, they're plastic. It also lists both 10,000 lumens and 5,000 lumens as the maximum output, which I've got to admit is quite confusing. But we've got the light, it's all one piece, so that's quite nice. We've got a very unique mounting bracket, probably more on that later. USB, no instructions. Okay, that'll be a bit of choose your own adventure to how it charges and all of those kind of things. Okay, so that's the handlebar light. We also got a helmet mounted one as well. So this one is sort of similar. Right, we've got a round mount, so I guess you could mount it on a handlebar. This one you can mount as a headlamp. Thankfully this helmet's got 2 mounts, so I'll be able to run it. We've got a charger. That's an upgrade on the other box. We've got the light unit itself. Okay, that looks pretty much as advertised, although just going to be mounting it with elastic bands, so that's not stellar, but it's there. It lists a max of 2,000 lumens. We've got a fairly long cable. Here's a little battery pack. It is very small, looks fairly tough. I think it might make a bit of rattling noise. I just wanted to check the battery because this one also said it was waterproof. Feels like it's been sealed with cardboard on the ends. Not sure that cardboard is waterproof. Okay, that's what you can get at the sort of cheaper end of the scale. As an example of a more premium brand or a brand name of lights, we've got these Outbound lights. I mean, they are a relatively small firm. They're based in the US. We've got a combo here of the Evo Trail and the Hangover helmet mount, and coming in at £290 for both lights. So this is the Trail Evo. So this is the nice little box we've got here. Okay, so what have we got? We've got the light and mounting hardware all set up already. That's nice. Got a little cardboard bit. Okay, we've got USB charging unit. That's great. Oh wow, we've even got an Allen key to adjust the clamp. Nice. Ooh, okay. This is really nerdy, but for me, this is really exciting. I know, instruction manuals. Who would have thought? Multi-page, loads of details. Yeah, It's nice. So listings wise, this one only has 2,200 lumens, which I've got to say does sound a lot lower, but in the instruction manuals, there's lots of details about all the different modes, including one called adaptive, which will change how bright the light is. So it'll start off quite bright and then dim a little bit until it gets to a good base level. And that should last for 155 minutes. There's another 3 additional main full beam modes and also 2 flashing modes. It's all listed in the instructions there. And the light itself is really neat and tidy. It's very compact and the clamp looks like it's really simple to use, so no puzzling required. Okay, and here's the helmet light. This one's called the Hangover, fun name. It's fully wireless, so unlike the other system, I haven't got any batteries. It's just this. It's really slimline. It uses an action camera mount. Now, how long does it run? Well, it can run, again, it's got an adaptive setting where it peaks this high bright mode, which drops down a little bit while you're riding, and that can run for a whole 100 minutes. There's lots of other settings too, so you've got 3 other full solid light modes, and then you've got 2 flashing modes. Again, there's loads of details because it's got full instructions. Interesting. Real puzzle here, lots of parts. They look like they might fit together, but they're not really fitting together. So I'm gonna have to sort of bodge it. And as I've got no instructions, I'm really lost. It's like these would work on, well, some road bikes, but not all. So I've got a fix instead, which is using a Garmin mount, slightly modified, to run it. I think that'll work. And I'm just gonna have to put 1 bolt in, I think, because all the standards on this one are all subtly different. Okay, it's not ideal, it's a bit wobbly and it's only held on by 1 bolt. So yeah, hopefully I'll ride really smoothly, because if this gets any kind of serious knock, I think it's gonna come unstuck. It's unfortunate. Got high hopes for this. Now we're gonna mount the light to the helmet. Now you should be really careful about this. It's really tempting to use zip ties or really solid mounts, but you need to use either a dedicated mount if one's available, or just be mindful that you want the light to break away in an impact. Why? Well, your helmet's designed to absorb impacts in a certain way, and if you bolt a really large structure to it that's immobile, well, A, you could twang your head on branches, or if you do crash, well, it might impact the strength of the helmet. This Smith helmet's got its own mounting hardware, so we're going to use that, and we're going to use this round bracket that also comes in that mounting hardware to mount the light. Here goes. Okay, that's the light mounted. There's a little bit of adjustment. It's actually not that tight, but apart from shimming it out, there's not that much we can do. Well, we'll go with that. Now we've got to work out where we're going to put the battery pack. The battery's not too heavy, but ideally I don't really want to put it on the helmet, because that's going to adjust and change the center of gravity. It's also quite high already, so even on my head, even as secure as the helmet is, it feels a bit wallaby and sort of odd. Okay, right. Thankfully this Camelback has got some nice pockets just here. I mean, the pocket is in a perfect place. It's less than ideal with this cabling. Maybe I'll be able to run it underneath. No, there's no space. Can run it, yeah. I guess I can run it under here to keep it from rattling too much. There we go, that'll do for now, I think. Right, that's the entry-level lights fitted. Okay, for the Hangover headlamp, it's an action cam mount, so that works really well with this Smith helmet. So I've just got to plug that in the right way round. Yep, thread that through there. And as it's all one-piece design, it should just plug in. And then I'll be able to adjust it a little bit on the fly. Tighten up a little bit more. Right, that was quite simple, wasn't it? Okay, we've got the clamp set up here, which is nice and adjustable. And we've got the bar clamp, so we can run it in a couple of different configurations. I think we'll try it this way. So it's a split design, so it should be nice and easy to mount. But essentially we've got a wing nut here to adjust the angle, and then we can just sort of adjust the height of where the light is and make sure it's not being sort of attacked by any leads, but it's very simple. The Asia Pacific region is a global leader in semiconductors. They make some of the highest quality electronic consumer goods on the planet. So it's no surprise that some of the brands that we see on these portal websites are brands that we've not heard of in the US or in Europe. Are all the brands up and coming, big brands, big players to be? Some of them probably are, but some of them aren't. What do I mean? Well, some of them that we saw were really inspired by designs of other big brands of lighting. And inspired is fine, copying is not. Counterfeiting is definitely not. Officially, all of these portals don't do that. They don't take other people's intellectual property and regurgitate it. But you do have to be really careful on these portals, because sometimes the picture looks really good and what you get delivered is very different. So make sure you take care when you're buying from these portals, because sometimes it's not as good as it looks. The big brands have really helped develop both the LED technologies and the batteries that we've got now, making them really consistent and cohesive as a package, which I guess is one reason why it's been really popular to have a head torch and a bar mounted one, is these big brands invested in the technology to have these smaller slimline designs. And that's another thing actually, is that they work really hard on making sure that the lights are easy to set up and easy to mount. Yes, that costs time and it does cost money. I guess the other thing is that they're moving away from this race of just bigger lumens and bigger numbers, because it's not just about a bigger number. Well, you might think it is, but it's not. And I'll tell you why. Beam pattern, that's why. So how those LEDs use those potential lumens make a really big difference. And that's where the big brands really spend the money and spend the time researching and development. I think the other area where lots of the brands, be exposure or glowworm or outbound lighting, do really good work is warranty. I know you might not want them to do any work on warranty because the product should be good enough, but lots of these brands have really good warranties where if you're buying any electronic component, you'd want that. But especially one where, especially in the UK, you're going to have lots of time on the light in the wet, the cold, maybe even the snow. And if it fails, well, it might not just be just a crap short ride, it's going to be a long walk in the dark home. Okay, right, now we're on the factory to consumer portal lights. Immediately, I've got a really strong sort of spotlight on my headlamp, but it's a really round sort of small spot lamp. It's a real small spot. Let me sort of demonstrate. There you go. So there's a really small ball, small circle of light in the center, and then there's not a lot of fall off. So it's really harsh around the edge. So it's hard to sort of gauge distance on it. Okay, so that's my most powerful setting, I think. It's a good spot, but it's that beam pattern. So the peripheral sort of throw of the handlebar light is good. It's a really quite broad beam, to be fair, but there's not a lot of throw in the middle. You'd think this combination would sort of work quite a lot better together, but again, they've not really been designed to work better. Oh, I think we just had a bit of pivoting there from the bracket. The bracket is a bit of a distraction, I must admit, as is the cable. This top headlamp was 2000 lumens, and this bar mount here is meant to be 10,000, but because that beam pattern is just a bit all over the place, it's just not as rideable. Oh, there's something definitely rattling. Crap. Well, that's not good, is it? Well, it's still on. That helps. Well. Oh dear. Okay, great example just there. Quite a quick corner where I needed to look further ahead than the bar light was doing. So the bar light gives me this wonderful, deep, long pull that's really wide. And then this headlamp is actually a spot. So it gives me just that extra long distance depth perception. The other thing that we need to talk about is also the colour. The light temperature is going to be different, so it can be brighter and whiter, or bluer and colder, or warmer. And all of these different factors mean that the light works in different ways and works on your eyes in different ways. So there's a lot going on in light, and it's not just a number. On the trail, it wasn't a numbers game, and it was really interesting. On paper, these lights should have been fantastic. They've got loads more lumens. This one, well, depending on which number you looked at, was either 5,000 or 10,000, so that's at least double the other lights. But the other light's beam pattern was much better. How it used its light on the trail was much better. It was easier to ride faster with that light. And that's not thinking about how the clamp worked and how easy it was to set up. And it's not thinking about the peace of mind that you get from a real company that is going to back you up with spares, and you're not going to have to worry about things catching on fire, which batteries in these units are really packed with energy and fires can happen. This lamp on my head got really hot. Maybe that was me not going fast enough. Maybe on a commute it would be okay. I think the other thing that sort of gave me peace of mind was that the other lamps, they just worked. So it's quite a seamless experience. With this one, well, the clamp didn't really work and it's already really rattly and I haven't knocked it. I think the other thing that scared me is that I could see light shining through the end caps here, which made me think that it's really not waterproof. So maybe for very casual use, it could work really well. But I think for proper mountain biking, out on the trails, out in the middle of nowhere where you need reliability, I think it's worth investing in the more expensive lights. For me, that night ride experience really reignited the ride experience. I'm really looking forward to heading out every night. Can I build a solid, dependable, possibly even reliable enduro bike from AliExpress for under £1,000? Let's find out. The challenge is to stick to a sub £1,000 build, buying solely from AliExpress. AliExpress is part of the Alibaba group. It is a B2B, B2C, C2C. What do I mean? I mean, it's a factory to consumer portal that is huge, staggeringly big. Will I be able to get everything I need on there? Well, we'll have to find out. Well, I'm not short on options, and actually I think that's the big take home is there are so many options. Some of them look very familiar to some of the big brands. Even some of the logos look similar. Maybe the letters are in a slightly different order, but it's just mind-blowing to see what's there. One thing is very different. The price is hugely different. But will what I order be, well, the same as I see on the picture? Time to find out. After 3 long months, we've finally got everything here, from cancelled orders to extra customs form. It's not been easy, but we've got everything here, hopefully, to build a 29er enduro bike. So hopefully around 160mm of travel front and rear, hopefully 1x12 drivetrain. Be interesting. Let's begin. Right, we're starting off with the frame, which cost me a reasonable £263, which, well, for the frame should be good. This is the box it came in, which is mildly worrying as, well, I thought I got a bike with a reach of around 440, but unless it comes in bits, I think I might have got something really small. But let's open it up, have a look. Right, okay, here is the frame all wrapped up. Thankfully it does look like a complete frame, some assembly required, but let's see. Oh, we've got, hopefully there's a little box with cable routing, otherwise we're slightly stuck. I mean, the paint looks all right. Apparently it's a large for cross-country and all mountain use. Interesting. I'm not sure if it's had any full testing, but let's see. So we've got a little box just in here, which I think is hopefully some bearings. Sealed bearings, headset. Okay, hopefully that's the right one. We've got lots of little cable guides there and a couple of bolts. Hopefully that's enough. Starting to come together. There isn't a guidebook to tell me how this assembly assembles. So we'll just have to do a bit of puzzling. But what I think I'm going to do is try and clamp it just gently so that I can actually move around it and cut some of this foam wrapping off. Yeah, let the fun begin. Okay, with the packaging off, we can start to see the frame. And in terms of how all the bearings feel, not too bad. This one's a little bit sticky. The alignment is, I've seen better. Effectively, what I'm talking about is the alignment of the back end meeting in this sort of clevis type pivot arrangement up here in the right place. And, well, the back end isn't necessarily straight. So that'll be interesting to put together. And that's the next phase. The next thing to notice is also that when you put paint on a surface, and if it's kind of a bearing loading area, often what you should do is machine that area out or blank it so it doesn't get covered in paint. And that's so that everything that's been machined to be square hasn't got a line of paint on top and get all mushy and squishy. Unfortunately on this, the bearing side has actually got loads of paint on. So yeah, that's interesting. Okay, we've got the Evo Sid shock here. It is a coilover. We've got some nice stickers. We've got some nice foam packaging. We've got a logo. Oh, we've got a logo. Looks similar to a brand. Put in the comments what brand you think that looks similar to. But this is an Evo Sid, just for record. Right, we've got some extra bolts. What I'm not seeing is any kind of additional shock hardware or any kind of bushing. So let's hope it fits, shall we? I was just eyeballing kind of what distance we need on the top here, and then I was just moving the shock back to see how far off these lower sort of shock hardware, low bushings are from being able to fit. I was kind of like, oh, that's weird. It's sort of making a clunking noise. And then I realised that we have an interface fit issue, whereby the shock isn't going to fit. So the diameter of this coil is too big for this frame. And it won't fit. It's hitting this pivot up here, and it means that, well, even if I got bushings to fit on the bottom, what we're going to have is a coil spring and effectively part of the shock rubbing against the frame, which won't work. Okay, we've got a workaround, which means we can work on, well, the rest of the bike. We're going to just put the shock in without the lower bushing and, well, make sure that we don't cycle the suspension. Okay, here is the seat post. We're just going to fit it in relatively briefly. Hopefully it's the right size. We'll then do the cable routing on this one. We've got wheels and it's easier to get the cable routing, well, in. Okay, there is quite a bit of paint on this outer edge of the headset. Best practice would be just to be able to, well, face that so that everything is aligned. Likewise on the bottom, we've got a bit of paint there. But for speed and, well, you might not have a facing tool at home, but if this was me, I'd definitely face that off. With the headset fitted, now it's time to put in the forks. And we've got some very jazzy forks. Wow, look, almost like Kashima, isn't it? Right, these are Bolnay, I think we're sticking to the name. Not Bolognese, not bologna. You know what, these look pretty good. Okay, we've got a jazzy fork here. We've got a pretty simple through axle. It's dry as a bone at the moment, but we can grease that up. We've got rebound control that feels, well, it feels like it's doing something. The decals look really good. The finishing looks good. It's got, interesting. Okay, we've got some ports on the back here. Not sure if those are fender mounts. These look a lot similar to, well, or very similar to some of the bleed ports that you get on both Fox and RockShox. You've got a similar guide to sag, which is sort of in this goldy anodized, which is not dissimilar to a SRAM setup. Potentially this is taken a knock in packaging, or or maybe it needs screwing in, but this is the, well, it's a lockout control. I'm not sure if it's, yeah, that feels a bit like it's about to fall off. I mean, it could have rattled in the packaging a lot, but that doesn't fill me with confidence. That is actually really quite loose. Yeah. So this is the stem. It's apparently CNC machined, and it looks like it's straight off the CNC machine. There's lots of, yeah, quite sharp edges. Very sharp edges. I'll give you more details about that. I'm just going to use this to make sure that I'm getting the right height to cut the steer on the fork. But yeah, a sharp CNC'd stem. The steer tube is, yeah, fair diameter, is a normal diameter. It's gone through the headset really well. Everything's nice and tight in it. But the CNC'd headset, which is really sharp, I've got shards of aluminium glistening on my fingers, doesn't want to go on at all, which doesn't fill me with, yeah, you can see it's already marking the stem. So what I'm going to have to do is try and pry open this lower clamp here, and the upper one. It is a really tight fit. These, I think, are the handlebars. I'll need some scissors. These were £8 and the stem was 12, which explains why, well, it wasn't really finished and I've got bits of aluminium sword in my hand. That is scary cheap. Okay, next is brakes. These are the Il-Pro E4s. I've gone for a wild purple colour. So these brakes were, time of ordering, just $63.33 for the pair, which is, well, pretty fun. They're not dissimilar to some other brands of brake that are out there. They do look very similar to some Trick Stuff brakes. Okay, here's the cable guides. They're quite small and diddy and look relatively fragile, but what is nice is you can see that they're an open section, so it means that I will be able to just plumb the cabling in. Here are the one is on the back, so you can see it's not a closed slot, so it should mean that, oh dear. Okay, I got really lucky there, but that's a really important and useful thing is to, well, some of these cable routing systems are quite neat, but can fall into the frame. I got really lucky, thankfully. And yeah, I'll say it wasn't the first time that that's happened. Not on this frame, but on others. But yeah, take care, because, well, sourcing more of these would be a little bit of a pain in the bum. Okay, time to put the brake through. I'm fairly confident because I've done similar cable routing before, but I'm not going to have to use a kind of end cap or sleeve. I think I'll be able to get lucky. That is famous last words, isn't it? So while we're on a bit of a cable routing roll, and we've still got space, I'm going to put in the dropper routing. I'm not going to plumb it all the way in, I'm just going to plumb it into the down tube and then probably into the seat tube as well. So when the bike is more complete, the cable will be in there. Ooh, right, got it. That was fiddlier. Could have taken the fork out to help myself. Okay, cable routing for the rear mech now. It's just slightly easier when everything's off. Hopefully, I should be able to slide this bit through. I think I've just got to plait it the other side. Normally on other bikes, you'd probably see a little bit of a zip tie, but on this one, yeah, we haven't got that. Now, I'm going to learn my lesson from last time where I spent far too long fishing around inside the frame, because we've got even less room up here now. I'm going to use the right tool for the job, an internal cable routing kit. It should make this quite speedy. The cable routing was a faff, I'm not going to lie. I think some of it is because the cable ports aren't really big, so trying to get and use a magnet tool in there when you'd already got a cable in was just extra fiddly. So the Groupset is meant to be, I say Groupset, it's not including the crank, so effectively we've just got cassette, front shifter and rear mech. It's all apparently Dior and it cost us just £60. Let's see what we actually got. Okay, we've got a chain that says, does it say Shimano on there? It does in a few places. Interesting. Very much a non-branded packet, that. Yeah. Is it official? Yeah. Okay, next bit is the cassette. Now, normally these are quite expensive because there's, well, lots of engineering in them. Definitely not plastic-free, this packaging. Right, okay. That's a really interesting Dior cassette, because to my eyes, that is not a Shimano cassette. I mean, there's nothing here that even has a Shimano product code. It is a 12-speed 46 tooth. So, fairly weighty. And it is a Sunshine SC. So it's a copy of a copy. Yeah, that is not a Shimano product. So this is a Dior Remec. This actually looks pretty genuine, to be fair, so that's good. More plastic packaging, but product codes that I'm more familiar with. M610, I think that is Dior. Okay, we've got a cable there as well, and it's a sort of shinier one, a bit like you'd get with a Shimano one. The quality looks good there. Possibly the actual product. Here's the cranks. These cost us £59.32. So these are the Evo Sid brand. I think our stem was the same. Apparently I will like it. Well, let's see, shall we? Okay, packaging is quite nice. It's got a bit of foam. Ooh! This looks very similar to an American brand that make landing gear for, well, moon rovers and Mars buggies and space stuff. I don't think these are constructed in the same way. These are apparently a 7075 aluminium, and it says Cyber on the back. I don't know what the chain line is for the chainring, the crank, or this bike, sort of like the frame setup. So I'm just gonna have to guess. It's gonna be a sort of like test and test again to see where that chain line is. And the first fun game of fitting a crank from a different brand, let's say, is working out what standard they're using for me to kind of fit a cup onto this and actually tighten it on. So yeah, here's the chainring, Evo Sid. It uses, I find this quite ironic actually, it says it uses the RF cinch system. It does recommend a bottom bracket tool to use as well, which is interesting because I'm fitting a chainring and that just relies on bolts. So yeah, interestingly misleading, and I love how they're using somebody else's intellectual property as a recommendation of a standard, but yeah, they're not really respecting that intellectual property to design the crank. Fun stuff. Again, I've put loads of grease on, but you can just hear that bolt squeaking, which is normally indicative that there's not enough thread prep on there. £86.18 gets you these Zito 29er wheels, which it's a P3 model. It does say it's boost. It's a 6-pore design. Well, that's quite nice actually. That just slides off. Cartridge bearings, and then we've got, yeah, we have got 6 pores. With a bit of grease in already. Gee. Purple theme here. Yeah, do all the purples clash? Do they go? The rim looks all right. I feel like it's jointed. We've got a basic rim tape. Relatively simple profile. Apparently it's made by heart, which I think is a good thing to see. Drilled only for Presta. Feel like setting them up tubeless will be an engaging process. I think we'll just use tubes just to make it speedy. Okay, these should be our tyres, which cost us £18 and I think 18 pence. That's for the pair, which is pretty good. Let's see what we've got. Okay, nice. We've got CST tyres, which are actually quite nice. Okay, they're saying they're 27 TPI, so they'll be robust, but the tread profile looks pretty good. CST are probably one of the biggest bicycle tyre manufacturers in the world, and whilst you might think, oh, I've never heard of them, they're not a big brand. You might have heard of another brand that they make for, and that's axis. And as those tyres aren't tubeless, and we're not sure the rims are either, we're going for tubes. We have got an off bondage, which is interesting. Maybe these are latex. No, we've got a TPU style one. We've got two of them here. We've got one in each packet. Look pretty good. I mean, hopefully it's just a tube. What could go wrong with a tube? I think this is a thing of standards, and often you get this with mountain bike standards whereby, yeah, you have a rim standard, and yeah, it's a certain size, and there's a certain international standard which parts should be made to so they don't fall off. And CST are a good brand. I kind of know their products, but this tyre is really loose on the rim. It's kind of like the rim feels almost undersized. But let's see what happens when we put a tube in. I'm sure it'll all be fine. Okay, it's aired up okay with the tube holding it in. I think it should be okay. I think it just is a good reminder of that. Yes, you can tubeless lots of things with sort of conversion kits, but sometimes rims are really loose. And if you're doing tubeless, then there isn't the extra kind of support, and there isn't the kind of retention where the tube is holding the bead next to the rim. So yeah, not all wheels, it would appear, can be tubeless. So just be careful. So you may have noticed in our Dior set, we got this, non-Dior part, which is a HG cassette fitting, so a sort of older Shimano style. And you may have noticed on our hubs, we've actually got the newer Shimano fitting. Yeah, we probably messed up in ordering that one, but we've got a Dior here, which is a Shimano Dior 12-speed, and it is microspline, so we're going to fit that. So yeah, just to be upfront and honest, we ordered the wrong part. Sounds all right, doesn't it? Now you may have noticed that we're using, well, a SRAM actual rotor here, and that's because when we ordered the brakes, sometimes the sort of online to consumer portals can be really confusing because the picture you click on, you think you're just looking at a different picture, but actually it's a different order request. So I think we'd tried to order with rotors, but we didn't get rotors. So we're using some stock rotors instead. So, interesting thing, it seems like potentially this sort of universal derailleur hanger type hanger, because I don't think it is definitely universal derailleur hanger, sort of binding with the hub. So it's one of those ones where we're going to have to investigate later. It's one of those things I think that when you buy from an online retailer, often there's support and there's websites and loads of information to help you. So if you've got an issue like this, you'll be able to contact it and get a new part. And it would be a standard part. It would be a universal derailleur hanger. But as this is all a bit of an unknown, this is just an unknown. And it's quite frustrating. So if you're a home mechanic, this would vex you for quite a while as to why your hub doesn't necessarily work. And frustrate you because you couldn't get out on the trail. But we'll try and figure out what it is. £12 and 8p gets you Enley aluminium alloy pedals. Ooh, matches the colour theme. Almost. Okay, we've got an aluminium pedal body with some, yeah, not that grippy looking pins, but yeah, they feel okay. Quite thin, quite sharp, and that central profile is really raised up, so I'm not sure how grippy they'll be. But that's all fun on the trail, isn't it? Not sure if you can hear that. There's a horrible sort of cutty scratching sound. That often happens when, well, the axles aren't cut very well, and I don't think it's the pedals, I think it's the cranks. Feels really unpleasant. Okay, I am going to join the chain, even though, as we can see, the chainring, despite being something that we thought would work, doesn't work at all. The spacing just doesn't sync with this chain. My guess is that it's an older SRAM style one, which makes sense because it's a 3-bolt fitting on the back. So maybe it's like an 11-speed SRAM. But yeah, it doesn't work. The the spacing is all wrong and it just doesn't mesh. No matter how I play with the chain, this isn't going to fit. So we're just going to place it in place and then work on the rest of the bike and make sure that everything else is good. And then we're just going to have to hunt down a fresh chainring. So grip time, we've got these interesting sort of ribbed and knurled grips that look like a slightly used grip from another brand. They are D-mount and they cost £1. Okay, another anonymous package. So let's open it up. Hopefully this is the saddle. Ooh, oh wow. Okay, what you can't smell is a really chemically smell that's coming off. It's a very strong chemically smell. Okay, I think this is I think it's meant to be a 3D printed one. Wow, the smell is really quite powerful. It's really overpowering. So we've got a funky shape. So profile is quite unusual. It's sort of curved, not dissimilar to a Specialized or maybe a older Nuteproof saddle. The rail graphics do look very similar to some of the big Specialized saddles. 143 width, so that's good. Large cutout with chrome graphics, which are always nice. And yeah, this, well, faux 3D printed form, which is not 3D printed. It looks hexagonal, so you might think it is like the 3D printed stuff, but it's just a one-piece rubbery mould. The seat post was 53 quid, which isn't too bad considering we get the lever as well. And the lever's relatively nice in terms of it runs on its own clamp and it's got a couple of different positions. It's a bushing variety one, so there's no bearing inside, but there is a cable tension adjuster, so that's good. So, is it possible to build a £1,000 Enduro bike from AliExpress? Well, we've got a bike-shaped object here, so yes, it is! Apart from a few small, possibly minor, or possibly major niggles. So, the shock didn't actually fit. So, yeah, not having the right data from the frame company to know which size of shocks would fit is a bit of a problem, because the one we've got should fit, but doesn't. It interfaces with the frame, and there's the shock hardware. Shock hardware, well, we can get stuff. That's sortable, but the shock not fitting means we'll probably have to get a different shock, most likely an air shock, maybe running it in a different orientation. So that is a bit of a problem. I'd say the other problem is also this chainring. Again, we could have misordered because it is quite easy to order the wrong part on these websites because, yeah, this one just, well, it doesn't work. Part of it does work, but it doesn't work consistently. Now, the other problem towards the back of the bike with the freewheel sort of engaging and not engaging, depending on how tight the rear axle is, that was a bit trickier to solve. Initially, I thought perhaps it's related to the freewheel and the rear hub, but I don't think it is. I think it's frame related. So potentially the spacing is out or the alignment is out. So we're gonna have to dig a little deeper. But back to that headline figure of a £1,000 Enduro bike. So it is possible, but it's not without its hiccups. So yeah, potentially you'd be able to order all of these parts and get it right first time for under £1,000. But with all the hitches and all the hiccups that we've had in terms of labour and then ordering new parts, it is going to be more expensive. And then there's the unknown. It is all unknown. We don't have warranties, we don't have customer feedback systems, we don't have, well, guarantees that stuff is meant to work the way it says it's meant to work. Fun stat time. So this bike was listed with a 65-degree head angle, but we've measured it as, well, between 68 and 67. We, adding a bit of fat, so it's, yeah, at best 2 degrees out, at worst 3 degrees out. Seat angle was meant to be quite a modern 76, but we've measured it at, well, 72 or 73. Again, we've given it some leeway, but it's not really that close. The rear centre, so from bottom bracket to the rear dropout, was meant to be 435, and we've got that, which is great. The reach was meant to be 440. we didn't know which size that was going to be on, and reach is kind of a tricky one to measure. So we've done virtual top tube, which is around 59. So if this was meant to be a large, well, it's quite a short front end. So yeah, not quite as listed, which is, I guess, one of the problems, is there is this discrepancy and this feedback loop on whether you get the right product and it's actually as listed. So all built up, we're going to give it a full bolt check. We're going to get it out to one of the GMBN hardcore crew and they are going to ride it. Some of the components, well, I feel that we should probably switch them out. I don't feel that confident with them just because of, well, the feeling in my hand and the experience I've got of fitting parts that can last versus parts that I don't think are going to last, which is tricky. And that comes back to this value point, I guess, on lots of these AliExpress and sort of direct-to-consumer portal bikes, is that you can find bikes that seem to be amazing value for money, and you do have to hunt around a bit. But I still feel like a lot of brand name bikes that you've heard of, and this isn't me being biased, I'm not being paid to say it, I'm saying it because, well, lots of these big brands have warranties and they've got guarantees, and some of that is down to, you know, nicer factories where parts are being made and actual sort of geometry charts that match up with what you're going to ride. Okay, again, there's going to be some discrepancy in how they're made, but there's someone to go back to. There's a brand that stands for it. And there's also the warranty, and that's a really big thing. And okay, you might say, oh, the warranty only lasts for 1 or 2 years, but with lots of discounts available at the moment, you can get a really good bike discounted. Maybe it's last year, maybe it's the year before, but you can get them at almost the same price of this. But you'll get the warranty and you won't have the faff of having to, well, hunt down another shock that is meant to fit. And it will have the geometry that, well, it's meant to have. So the ride qualities that create that better ride experience and that perceived value will actually be there. If you've enjoyed this build, well, let us know in the comments. If you've built something similar, let us know in the comments. Get joined in that debate. And also, what should we build next? I mean, I'm already thinking that we should try and get a hardtail because, well, there's less faff there, isn't there? That'd be more fun, right? Maybe even a single speed. Let us know in the comments.